Hello, I'm Sylvia Carmen Cuinan, the Executive Director of the BAS, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Curator Culture. Thank you for joining us today as we wrap up a week, 7 or 8 days of wonderful exhibitions, online programs, self-distanced social events and cultural events, all in support of Miami artists and art institutions and our friends and guests. So first of all, I'd like to thank the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for their ongoing support of Curator Culture. And today I'd like to thank Art Bridges for their additional support. And with this, I welcome and introduce our moderator, Tom Healy.
Thank you, Sylvia. And thank you everybody for joining us on a Sunday. I know we have people, it's the evening in some parts of the world where people are on, and the morning in others, so happy Sunday. And thanks for coming to us at the end of a strange and interesting art week here in Miami. And we're going to have our virtual conversation again with Curator Culture, which over these last somewhat crazy 9 months has been something we've done virtually and been able to bring people together. Today, we're having, differently from our usual talks, which bring two people from very different walks of life together to meet one another. Today, our conversation brings together two close friends who've known one another a long time. The brilliant artist Abraham Cruzvillegas and his friend and renowned chef Elena Reygadas. So would you please join me, Elena and Abraham?
Hello, Tom. Hello, Elena.
Hello. So I was hoping that we could start, since you are friends, that you might introduce one another for us.
So, okay, well, thank you. I would say ladies first.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm very thrilled and happy about this conversation. And well, Abraham is a very good friend of mine. We are friends many years ago. I'm not only a big admirer of his beautiful art, but I am also a big admirer of talking to him, of always listening to him. He has taught me so many things. He's always curious. He's always a pleasure to talk to. And I am sure today would be one of these beautiful talks with him. Thank you, Abraham, and thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Elena. And yeah, I think, before talking about what my perception of your work and you, I want to say thank you to Sylvia and to everybody at the museum, at the BAS, Leilani, Valeria, everybody, Johanna, and everybody who's been involved in this project that came to, I think it's arriving to a good point, a good situation in a very strange, weird circumstance globally, and that it only, I think, it allows us to give evidence that it's still possible to do things even in the worst of the situations, which of course it's not yet the worst, but anyways. My perception of Elena is, Elena's work is that she's been constructing a beautiful language that didn't exist before. She's a very rigorous and disciplined scholar of making artworks that are to be eaten, to be served in dishes before us with a drink, and then you combine things that become part of your body. And I've witnessed in the long term now that we know each other, that she's a scholar, properly said, making research and producing knowledge. And this way, I think it's her heritage, what she learned as a cook. I think we, as I know, and everybody maybe know now, that she started cooking in London, and then she absorbed everything like in the understanding of what it means, like producing something that will become part of your body, as I said earlier. Then she transformed this learning into something deeper by producing, again, research on local products, local economies, supporting sustainable environment for producing food. that is based in like a ancient knowledge that is not just like mixing ingredients like that, but it means like meaning symbolic values and discourse that goes deep when it could go, I mean, deeper in what we can discuss later, but just like her research on insects and flowers and I mean, like seafood, mixing Mediterranean food with contemporary and pre-Columbian food from Mesoamerica. It's a big lesson. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you for the nice words.
Oh, I wanted to follow up on that issue that you talked about, Abraham, of this idea of learning and seeking and producing knowledge. Elena, in your extraordinary book, Rosetta, which is filled with stories about your family and your learning and forming restaurants, and also filled with extraordinary recipes, is that you quote someone who says that knowledge cannot come to those who neither taste nor smell. So could you talk about this idea of knowledge through the natural world and through the things that we taste and smell?
Yes, Tom, of course. I always feel that knowledge is related to a rational thinking. Like, at least in this part of the world, it's always been like this, scholars, and it's always been very rational. And for me, there's this type of knowledge that it's very, very strong. For me, even stronger than the rationality, which is the intuition and the use of the senses. And for me as a cook, I feel that through smelling and tasting, you really get to know many things, and you really put your knowledge in other kind of level, in other kind of the obvious rationality. So for me, through smelling and tasting, you can really realize culture and understand many ways of civilization. That's why I wanted to honor this quote, because I think it really makes sense. And I think we need to be really alert about how powerful senses are.
Well, thank you. We're gonna, I think in a minute, we'll put up some slides that can sort of set the tone and ideas for the conversation we're going to have. And one thing I just wanted to ask you as we start that, Elena, is that we talked about this talk today as a reconnection with everyday life. And I'm curious, what do you think has happened that we're in need of this reconnection rather than that knowledge being present to us already?
Well, I feel we have, in the late years, we have been more and more disconnected from Earth, from the basics. We are less and less aware of what happens in our soil, in our earth, in our animals, in our plants, in our bodies. We are alert of many other things, but these very basic human things, we are just, not making a lot of awareness. And, thinking in Abraham's work, in many of his works, he's always making a point of life. For example, in his beautiful work in the Turbine Hall of the Empty Lot, yes, which for me, it was not empty at all. No, the life was there. And we need to be aware of that and not sometimes looking, into other things. So I feel that the more basic things are what we need to be aware of. And through this pandemic, I think it was very evident how we need to go back to what is the everyday and the more important things that sometimes we just feel are not.
Thank you. So maybe you could take us through some of the slides that you've put together.
Well, these are, some of the things I use, of the ingredients I use in my cooking, which are, very related to plants, to all the vegetable side of Mexico, that we have a big culture of herbolarism. And this is, for example, an hoja santa, which is, the sacred leaf, which is a beautiful leaf that we use in many ways. We also use insects because of their power, because of their protein, because of their taste. And also because our tradition and our culture, we've always used insects in our food. Of course, much more when we didn't have any other form of animal protein before the Hispanics came to Mexico. And I use them just to remind us that, but also because of their powerful flavors. And on the other side, there's mamey, which is a beautiful fruit that I've been using very much. I use not only because of the fruit, but especially because of its stone. Like the stone of the mamey, it's a powerful bitter almond. And it's something that usually goes just to waste. However, it's for me, it's like a gem. It's really a powerful flavor. It's just like an explosion. And I feel it's very important to try to use all the fruit and all the part of the ingredients, and not just sometimes the easiest or the most evident part of them. And this is what I constantly want to search. And I, call these slides the chef as medium, because I feel ingredients are the ones that really tell us what to do. Like chefs are really just like a medium for the ingredients. The ingredients talk, and the ingredients really give us many information. You just need to look at them, look where and when they grow, with whom they grow. And I think then you just get all the information. Like, I don't think chefs do that. I think ingredients are the ones that give us all this the information, and chefs, we just need to look at them and observe them and then let them talk. So
Abraham, this is so similar to ways you talk about art making.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Tom. I think, I'm really paying attention to everything Elena says, and I like a lot what the way she bends, let's say, the conversation in terms of research or producing knowledge as based in intuition instead of like following a rational line of constructing any kind of language or discourse. And I think, like exactly as she says, as Elena says, it's like more like going back to the basics and to the very, let's say, the most simple of the elements that can produce knowledge, properly speaking, but in a way that it can break its own paradigm. This is like essentially like decolonizing the language and the knowledge, or the way we produce research, for instance. Then, like the way I try to make my work is analogous in a way to Elena's work. The way I try to appeal to the simplest, let's say, of the ways of constructing. Of course, it means many times like a kind of an unstable process in itself, not only physically, but also conceptually. And this is what it could lead to a new paradigm, not necessarily looking to constructing a new paradigm, but more like the breaking of the previous one. So this like kind of an interstitial process or moment that I think we are living constantly, not only in the identity and in the goal for learning. It's something that produces more and more and more knowledge. I like a lot like the way we arrived to do this project in Miami at the BAS. because in fact it's appealing more to the basics. We produced this list of plants that could be displayed out there in the museum, that it's not necessarily to be seen as a decision in terms of choosing plants, but the way they chose themselves as in terms of the weather, the environment, the lasting possibilities for them, but also in terms of being hopefully like healing or for use for food, and mostly for insects and birds and local birds and so on. So this means a lot. And in terms of the traditional medicine, the herbolaria, and I think it's accompanied by some benches that I designed in a very random way, using only basic shapes like circle, rectangle, triangle, using basic colors like blue, red, yellow, in a very simple way. Then there is a person whistling out there, mimicking the sounds of local birds and bugs. But I think it's in this way that I think we are very similar, Elena and me, the way we are trying to find for the simplest, but in a way that follows the senses, as she says. And I of course, I'm very, very much in love with all these dishes, beautiful and delicious and smelly dishes that includes the strangest of the things, like the chicatana ants, for instance, or a honey from a very weird bee from the Yucatan Peninsula, the Melipona, and the acosiles and the cocopaches were like cockroaches, and it's not surprising that they are, as she said, source of protein when there was no cows or pork in Mesoamerica. So it's going back to the basics that could produce an encounter with something that, in fact, it's ourselves. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So if I could take just a second for the people who are not in Miami or haven't seen Abraham's installation yet, there's a very beautiful manicured lawn right in front of it's the front yard of the Bass Museum. And over the last few weeks, as if it's just rising out of that, there's now a natural wilderness and of all these native plants. And just, I see this insect right in the front of the screen here, Elena. Yesterday I was by and there were monarch caterpillars eating away at the milkweed there. And there've been lots of butterflies and other things sort of kind of authoring and changing this piece of yours, Abraham. So,
that's it.
Elena,
that's it. Sorry, yeah.
No. Elena, maybe you could show us the next slide.
Well, this slide, it's just a bit of the examples of some local resources and the local economies that we have in Mexico City. And I next to them, I quoted Abraham's beautiful and very witful installation in the turbine hall, the empty lot, which for me, it really resembles the chinampas, which are the very ancestral way of producing food that we still have in Mexico City in the southern part. And the chinampas is not just a perfect way of producing food in terms of environmental point of view, but it's also a way of living. It's really just an example of how the local way of producing food can be just a way of living where there's many people in there, where there's no machinery, where there's a respect for the environment and the time. And it really reminds me to the empty lot work of Abraham, in the sense that the soil is just everything. Everything grows in a good soil, in any soil. There's life in the soil, even in the apparent soil next to the streets. And the chinampas, it's, in the slide of the right, you can see the corn and the other trees that hold the chinampas, which is it's an island. It's an island made by the humans, and it's a very ancient way where there's also insects and there's also these amazing animals that grow still there that are called also Abraham loves the
ajolote.
Ajolote, exactly.
Axolotl, the salamander.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a perfect habitat. And we still have this in the middle of the biggest city of the world that, it's contaminated and it's the worst city in terms of environment. And we still have this jewel. And next to that, there's this also image that I love, that it's a huerto, the Huerto Roma, that you can see in the top part of the slides. And here there was a building, and a very tall building that in the earthquake of the 85 fall down, and in Tlatelolco. And now there's a huerto, a huerto in the middle of the city.
Yeah, an orchard.
An orchard, I'm sorry. And we have many of our produce, of our, plants and herbs and fruits from these two sources of the city. And it just feels so, it just makes sense to be local and to really source our things from these two parts of the city. An orchard that, came to life after the ruins of an earthquake. And on the other hand, this beautiful way of growing food that it's the chinampas. So, this thing of the local economies and the local resources, I just feel it's so clear how we need to search from them and stop, searching from other places that they just don't make sense in many ways.
I love that you described that you find this even in the cracks in the sidewalk, things growing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I love, I'm sorry, just to close.
Go.
That I just think that really life emerges from ruins, and life emerges from sometimes these things that are apparently empty.
Yes. Yeah, Tom and Elena, I think it's something, the reference to the work I made at the Turbine Hall, it's quite crucial for me, because in fact, my idea came out of walking around that area in London near to the Thames River, and finding out that even in the hardest and the toughest of the winters, there is something growing in the cracks in between pieces of stone or concrete, and giving evidence that, the power of nature, but also resilience, And then it's so impressive for me, Elena, that you mentioned the chinampas, because in fact, my idea was like producing some kind of floating platforms in which something could grow during the winter in London, and then planting nothing, but just watering and providing light. And many things grew up there in 6 months. And that was, one of my main references was the chinampas, this island from the Aztec period, and the ecosystem in which they roast corn, but also chili pepper, beans, and a pumpkin, rotating in a cycle that ever ends, and it's nurturing the soil, in fact, and also providing a great environment, for instance, for the axolotl salamander. So it becomes more like a symbiotic system that we kind of lost. And I think it's something that I think it's part of my goal and my proposal for Miami again, trying to just to witness and sharing this situation with anybody who could will to do so, to witness this, how the main actors performing or constructing the work, the sculpture in this case, outside there at the bus, would be insects and birds, like dropping seeds from something they ate somewhere else and traveling to reproduce themselves, like, as you described, the monarch butterfly stone that travel from Michoacan in the west of Mexico to the far Illinois lands just to reproduce. And the gene they have, I mean, how the information they have in there still happens like that. And it's quite surprising that they don't think about like borders and walls that could be constructed by politicians. And this is also something about the termite hole work, that it's everything that grew up there are species that came out not from the UK. So it's all about trading not only with goods but also with people, for instance, in terms of the construction of the economies and the map, the political map as we know it now.
So I want to ask you both, because I'm looking at the turbine hall pictures, and I remember being in London for that. And one of the fascinating things to me about what both of you are saying, like being a medium for ingredients, or as you've talked about, Abraham, being a voyeur to the relationships of different elements of an artwork. There's a kind of sense of learning and watching and being patient. And those very virtues that are there sometimes drive people nuts, because people are used to seeing an artwork as a clear kind of object. And I think people were deeply impatient. Some people were deeply impatient with that process. And I would assume that's what you're trying to get people to do, is change the way they think of how art works. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I don't know, Elena, what do you think? But in my case, I'm really amazed by when you arrive to a restaurant in Colonia Roma in Mexico City, and then you don't know what you're really asking for. Then you maybe ask for advice to Paulina or anyone who's in charge there for telling you what the ingredients are, etc. And then you receive something that maybe is unexpected. But only by tasting and trying and smelling and touching and making it yours, then it can change your taste. This is the way I think art can change as well. Like trying and educating people so they can maybe understand that as they did accept when photography became art, or cinematography, or installation, or performance, or all these new platforms that are not so new, in fact, then how these can become again paradigms in terms of the art and how they are in the institutions and the galleries and in collections at the houses of people who love art. And I think this is a process of tasting and learning and risking, as when we just get something like a siquilpac from the Maya culture. You know, like the aspect is not so appealing, but at the end, it's such a feast in your mouth, and it becomes, it blows your mind, you know?
I feel, as you said, Tom, and I feel that happens in many ways in Abraham's work, that patience, it's so important. It's so important when you observe a piece of art. It's so important for knowledge. It's so important for understanding how to go and where to go. And it's, you know, it's very, for me, one of the most important ingredients in many of the things I do. Mm-hmm. For example, when I have a bakery, and for me, baking bread is one of the most beautiful things I can do with my hands. And it's not just water and flour and salt, what it's on a bread, but patience, it's the most important ingredient. And I also think it's one of the most important things when we talk about knowledge, when we talk about art, when we talk about conviviality and social ways of being together again. And sometimes we don't understand how important patience and how much patience give us. And I really think it's one of the most beautiful things that we have to reconsider and reconnect with.
And very powerful to hear, I think, because we live in very impatient times.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Could you show us some more images? Yeah.
Well, this is one of my most important lately. Like, I've been really, really into how earth and health are related. And me as a cook and as someone that it's so related to food and to cooking and to the food industry, it's something that I'm trying to be more aware and more aware of what it means. And in Mexico, it's so clear how the change of the diet in the last 40 years has changed us as civilization. And for me, it's very sad, and it's something that we need to fight for. Of course, we all are aware of what the food industry is in terms of pollution and in terms of industrial consuming. And I'm always trying to go against this. I know that it's not the only way of producing food through this, super unawareness and unhealthy way of doing things, not just for the earth, but also for our bodies and for our diets. And, I pointed this book of Eating NAFTA from Alicia Galvez that for me was really, really regarding in many ways, alarming, but also, understanding of why Mexico now it's, a country that on the one hand has the best and one of the most richest ways of food culture, and how we are so rich in biodiversity. And on the other hand, we are the country that have the highest obesity and diabetes. And for me, that, it's just so it just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be like this. And in this book, it makes you understand how with these old neoliberal ways of making things and the political ways, and especially after NAFTA, how the Mexican culture changed in its diets. And not just because we started to eat other kinds of food, but what it implies, all the migration that it started to happen, what it ended in, just families without fathers, mothers that needed to go to work all day long, and families that instead of eating what they produce, started to eat Maruchan or instant soups, ramens, and this kind of soups and foods that just ended in a country completely out of nutrition and vitamins, and not just in their bodies, but in their values as well. So in this way, as a cook, I think we just not should look into a dish and how beautiful it is and how beautiful it tastes, but we need to be aware of who we buy the food to and what implications it has. So we need to be much more aware that we are not just people that do food, but we can, have a really, we have a political actually decision in every action that we do. We are just part of a big chain. And, for me, food should be medicine. Food shouldn't be something that aligns us and really makes us in this, way of having this high on nutrition country.
And you see that one of those implications and costs is in this pandemic.
Yes.
How much this has.
Yes, absolutely.
People's health. Yeah.
Yes, now more than ever, it's so evident in the pandemic. So that's why I want to use always local ingredients, and I'm trying to use other kinds of protein, and I am more moving into plant-based dishes. And it just, for me, makes much more sense, not just because of the time we are living, but because the culture that we come from, the Aztec diet, the pre-Hispanic diet was almost plant-based. So it just, we are just going back again to our civilization, to our roots, to our basic things. So it's very, revealing in many ways.
Yeah. Do we have some more images to show?
Maybe I just want to say something, if you don't mind, about what Elena just said, that I think it's super important, the way that we have a big pandemic in Mexico and in the world, I would say, that is not COVID. It's this malnutrition habits that go through all these cheap, the easiest of the ways for getting food that are completely not healthy. And it's, of course, complicated in terms of the economy, to produce and to keep an eye on how the products are made, where they come from. Are they using pesticides? Are they using GMO processes? And so to produce cheaper food. And so, but I think it's very important not to forget that, in Mexico, as Elena said, traditional food, in fact, it was like that for ages, and including, again, corn, cacao, tomato, chili pepper, beans, and so, in a way that it was produced in a healthy way as well, without any genetically modified, etc. And so it's an equation that we have yet to sustain and to support in a consistent way. And I like very much that from Elena. And I still remember talking with Dr. Elena Alvarez Buya, who's the champion of non-modified genetically corn, and who's really protecting the corn. And she made a big campaign with the beautiful artist Francisco Toledo, in terms of saying that without corn, we have no culture, in Mexico at least. But that's a kind of an emblem that we can extend to other cultures in the world the same way.
Thank you. So, Elena, tell us about the milpa-based diet.
Well, we are many of us have heard about the milpa and how it was a way of production in pre-Columbian times. And of course, in many ways, it resembles the chinampa in the ways that it's a very sustainable way of producing food. And in the way, for me, more beautiful than ever, is that it's not just a way of producing food. A milpa, it's a way of producing a collaboration between people. It's a way of living. It's a philosophy, one more time. A milpa, it's a system of production that it has some times of the year beans, other times of the year corn, other times of the year chilies. There are insects there are birds as well. But the idea is that there is a rotation of the different ingredients, but also this gives the earth a healthy way of being. So the beans give certain, magnesium and certain vitamins and minerals to the earth itself. So in this way, the earth doesn't erode. The earth is healthy, and it can survive, and it can be rich, and it can be an everlasting place of producing food. And in this sense, for me, it's also like a symbol, a parallelism of how, or an example of how we can be as a community. So for me, it's a beautiful emblema of our culture in Mexico, and also of how we need to reconnect in the ways of collaboration and biodiversity in many ways, not only diversity in food or in ingredients, but also diversity in terms of, people and cultures, and just in a communal way of living as well. So for me, milpa, it's just, something that we need to be always remembering.
Maybe we could show the last few slides together and then talk about that, you and Abraham and I.
Of course. Well, this is, something that I think it's also important to talk to, like the ways of our culture, our, history in Mexico, that of course, corn, it's our basic and most important ingredient. However, we cannot erase our culture, and sometimes even violent, ways of culture can merge together and bring other things. And wheat was introduced, of course, with the Hispanics to Mexico, but they blended and they merged together. And now we have, the amazing torta de tamal, which is a corn, ingredient into a bread of wheat. And right. This way of civilization, I think it's sometimes beautiful to remember. And this was just a bit of the examples of the food we do in the bakery and in Rosetta, of the colors, of the ingredients, of how we go back and forward with a tamal, that it's something made so many years ago, but maybe we use celeriac, which is an ingredient that, of course, was introduced lately, but that they merged together in a very respectful way as well. And I think, this is what in gastronomy, in food, in cooking, we just keep searching and looking and observing and trying to give to our customers, just to share all these ingredients and merges that we bring together. And for us, it's just to give and to try to just, this excitement that we have as cooks, we just always try to pass it away. We are just, just givers in the end. And of course, the hands, that it's something that I, as a cook, I never want to forget, is our most important instrument. And I think that's also part of Abraham's, work. And he's always, you can feel in his work how the hands and the touch and the feeling, it's there. So it was just like a symbol of the importance of the hands and of the touch and of the senses. Never to forget to touch in many ways.
Abraham, could you talk a little bit about that, about the physicality of art making and use of the
it's funny because now that I'm looking at these images, I love, since I was a child, making my own very spicy sauces in a mortar with a pestle. And I'm still the best at home with my family, they say, because it's the spiciest, but it's not poisonous. And then, but my relationship with this stone piece, that I would say it's properly a sculpture, it's very particular. And today I was just exchanging with one of my students here in the School of Art in Paris. He's from Brazil. His name is Gabriel Morais. And we were talking about this recently, and he just answered a question of me. like, what's the name of the mortar in Portuguese, as he being carioca, from Rio. And he said, I know it's pilão, but he didn't remember the name of the little stone that you use to grind inside the mortar, the pestle. And just he answered me that it's almofares. So I love this kind of thing that it goes with language, because of course Brazil, like Mexico, were colonial people that adopted different traditions and knowledge, again, from the colonizers, but transforming, hybridizing, or transforming into something that goes beyond that. And I think he himself, Gabriel, told me, I'm very, very happy having this pilão at home, because I can grind coffee in the morning, I can grind pigments in the afternoon for my paintings, and in the night I can grind good chili peppers for my sauce. So everything goes through this little sculpture again, the use of hands, this way that go to the mouth, go to the canvas, or go to the paper as a drawing. I'm really in love with this, and I cannot imagine living without this thing that connects with everything. And it's funny because now in this picture of yours, Elena, that I find very, very honest and very describing, the use of Tupperware. The object itself. It's something we still cannot get rid of. I love it. A student of mine some 20 years ago made her thesis for the school when she finished studying in the art school about the analogy between a Hopi, the Hopi people in the US, a Hopi bowl that includes inside the whole cosmogony of the Hopi people, and a Tupperware piece as a synthesizing object of the American culture. I think this is something that makes a parenthesis. The two objects, they hold together everything we know as culture, properly speaking, culture, agriculture, but culture, art, and so on. So I'm really get curious about, I will keep using in my work ceramics and plastic and everything that could be part of the description of our identity in 21st century.
And there's something so powerful about that image of it being circular, that connectedness in time and shape, and the whole idea of a cosmology and in a world like that. Beautiful. So we have a number of questions that people have been asking. I wanted to put to you both. Abraham, we've gotten a number of questions that you've titled the work here in Miami as Agua Dulce. Could you talk about that? People have wanted to hear.
Yes, of course. Yeah, when I started making this proposal for Sylvia and the people at the BAS, I wanted to learn more about Miami and the history of the history of Florida, Miami, of course, the US, the world, humankind, and so. And then I in one of the descriptions of the etymology of the word Miami, as referring to the big lake, the Okeechobee, I think is the name now.
Yes.
They used to call it the large water, big water. But also in one of the versions, they say that it could mean water you can drink, which links this region with every other culture around the world, like Egyptians, Aztecs, and so, settling themselves and establishing as a culture and as a people to grow and develop around the lake, around the river, around water you can drink, and not seawater. And then I embrace this because I've been working with the idea of water as a crucial issue in our time. It's been always, as I just said, like the delta of the Nile River in Egypt. That's the very beginning of many, many important things, like the invention of beer, just to name one. But many other things, like the writing and so on, all around rivers and water. But then also in contemporary times, like the struggle or between countries for water property. And this leads me to talk about Yasnaya Elena Aguilar, the linguist from the Mije culture in Oaxaca, who's talking about as language as the real political territory. But she's using water as an example of discussing the concept of water from the Indians in India, and then how it was adapted into colonialism as Indians because of a confusion. And all comes from a river name. So that's why I wanted to use Agua Dulce as the title of this project, just like making a little glimpse to this more problematic or interesting, let's say, appealing issue.
Thank you. So Elena, we're getting a number of questions about your restaurants and cooking. And one person said, if you could transport us to Rosetta and took us inside, could you tell for people who haven't been there, can you open the door for us and walk us inside to what it means to have a restaurant?
Of course. Well, Rosetta is situated in Colonia Roma, which is a beautiful area of Mexico City. It's a very particular area because it has big buildings from the Porfirian times, which was a mixture of,
French taste.
Exactly. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, and we are establishing one of these houses, of Porfirian houses, which has top ceilings and many, small spaces, small rooms. So the idea was to make it more cozy. So we just try to put many plants around, and we try to do like a garden, like an inside garden. So there are many paintings in the walls in a very kind of old style aesthetics, but not cold. But I always try to say that it's like a house. It's just the feeling of going to maybe to your grandma's house, in the sense that it's very, very cozy and very beautiful. So it has these top walls, they are paintings in the walls, and we always try to do the best food possible, but in a very easy setting, so that you feel, relaxed, you feel not stiff at all. There are no, clothing there in the tables. It's just, this idea that you can have a delicious meal, an amazing sobremesa, that it's always the conversation that Mexicans have for hours after a lunch or a dinner, but without the stiffness of sometimes associated to big restaurants. And this is what I feel it's Rosetta in this way, like just beautiful food, beautiful conversations, but relaxed, not stiff at all.
We can fantasize that this is our sobremesa after one of those great meals that we're having today. So
yes.
We're coming close to the end of our time, but one of the questions that keeps coming up in this conversation we've had of reawakening knowledge and memories and traditions, people have asked if both of you could share an early food memory of yours, of some kind of nourishment that you remember from childhood.
What I remember, my first sense of a taste in my mouth, it's just humid earth. Like I used to, as a very, very young child, I used to eat the earth of, I don't know, I used to love the taste of the wet and humid earth. And this is my most ancient association of taste.
You know, it's funny. You know the late novelist Reynaldo Arenas. He talked about that same memory of childhood of eating the dirt, eating the earth. Yeah.
Apparently, it has to do with something that you lack of certain minerals, and sometimes young children do this. They just eat earth because they need it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe that happened to me.
Abraham?
Well, I would love to have that beautiful memory and like an early memory, but I don't have it. So what what I really have as a beautiful souvenir is having at my grandmother's house in Michoacán, in Nahuatzen, Purepecha community, sheep tribe tacos, like fried on the comal, like just like grilled tribe. And it was like something that's what I lack of. Yeah.
This conversation has made me very, very hungry, and it is lunchtime here in Miami, at least. So I want to thank you both so much for joining us. But I would like, if you could, I'd like to first of all thank the BAS team. There are so many people who work at the BAS and during this trying time, and an extraordinary team who puts these talks together. So I'd like to give my gratitude and love to them. And Elena and Abraham, I'm sure you might like to extend to your teams and communities some thanks too. So we could end with that.
Well, of course, I want to thank also all my team and the beautiful people that has been with me these years. And, you know, without them, I couldn't have done nothing. And I have beautiful bakers, beautiful cooks, beautiful people at the dining room, all of them passionate about what they do, about what we have done. And, you know, I want to thank them deeply about it.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry, not only to my team in Rosetta and my restaurants, but also to all the people that are in the country producing food against all odds, you know, being still romantic and still completely concerned about what's best for our body, but also for our earth. And I want to thank them deeply, because without those ingredients, we cannot do anything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They are really warriors. So I want to thank them deeply.
Yeah, they are resisting the biggest economies and globalization. And so I would share with you, Elena, this gratefulness with them and with you, of course, and with everybody who are supporting these economies that are endangered. And on my side, I want to thank Silvia and everybody at the museum, again at the BAS, like Leilani and Valeria, and Haru from my atelier in Mexico City, but also like everybody I can still learn something from. Like I would say, a long time ago, before knowing Elena, I think I learned myself that the people I work with, we all love food. And we all think that it should be a human right, like having dignity by what we eat, and respecting nature and respecting each other, helping each other, being together is the most important thing on earth. Then the people I work with, my galleries, my friends, you know them, Elena, they are, as we say in France, not gourmet, but gourmand. Just gluttony, a gluttony mafia. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
And so I'll just end by thanking our generous supporters, the Knight Foundation and Art Bridges. And thanks to you all of our audience who's tuned in today. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Abraham, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias a todos. Gracias, Ale.